Hello and welcome to Welcome to So You Think with Pastor Terry, the show that is spiritually relevant, culturally significant, that encourages people to look at life issues in a non-traditional way. We'd like to welcome you to season two of So You Think with Pastor Terry. As some of y'all may have missed, we were on for like 4 months and then we took a month off. Well, that was just to, give us a little time to refocus, to breathe a little bit, to get things, on focus and things like that. So we are so glad to be with you on season 2 of So You Think. And we have some really amazing topics we're going to be covering this season. And we're really excited about what's to come and what's going on. Just want you all, I want to just let you all know that this show is being recorded and it's going to be replayed again on Thursday on Envision Radio at 6 o'clock. So join me on Thursdays at 6 o'clock on So You Think with Pastor Terry. And I want to say hello to our listeners in Belgium and Nigeria. Oh my God, this show has been like accepted all over the world. So we're really, really excited about that. Just thank you all for being a part of the So You Think family. Tonight, we have a really awesome subject tonight, and I am so ready to get into this because anytime I have these guys on here with me, the show winds up, usually have to break the show up into like 3 or 4 different kind of segments. And so I'm really excited about having these gentlemen with me again. We had them on before when we talked about when pastors bleed, I do believe. And so we're just really excited to have them on to talk about this topic. So before I even mention the topic, I want to bring them on with me now. Tonight we have with us Pastor Brian Stewart. Pastor Brian Stewart, senior pastor at, what's the name of that church again? College Hill Seventh-day Adventist Church in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Don't forget it.
Don't forget it, right. So we're so glad that he's with us tonight. Thank you, Pastor Stewart, for being with us. Next, we have Pastor Stuart Peoples, pastor of New Vine Baptist Church in Lexington, Kentucky. Hey, welcome. Good to have you back again.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Doing well?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now we're going to cut it up. We're going to chop it up. And last but not, I got 2 people, but the other person hasn't signed on yet. But we do have one more, and it's Dr. Charles A. Wallace from Princeton, New Jersey. And so we are so glad to have him on with us. And we'll be joined by one of my co-hosts here, hopefully in a few minutes. But we're going to go ahead and get started because we know this is going to be a meaty topic tonight. And I'm really excited about discussing it. And we're going to be talking about tonight. So you thought that we weren't going to talk about pastors and post-traumatic stress disorder. Wow. Okay, somebody just drank some tea.
Yes, sir.
And it wasn't sweet tea, bro, because we're really going to dive. And my thing is, one thing I really want to stress to the listeners today is this. We're letting you guys into conversations that pastors only have amongst themselves. And sometimes they don't even have it amongst themselves. They have it just with themselves because they don't feel like they have anybody that they can talk to. So we're really going to let you all into an intimate space tonight. So please, we're going to be opening the floor up for questions or comments. If you are watching via any of the platforms that we're on, whether it be Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, wherever, if you are watching or listening to us on any of those platforms, you do have the ability to post in the comment box and leave your comments. And we will be glad to get to those as the show goes on. But again, we're going to be talking about post-traumatic stress disorder and the clergy tonight. And a lot of people don't understand what PTSD is. And PTSD, it used to be called shell shock a long time ago. And it was usually referred to when you're dealing with the military, where they've gone and they've witnessed traumatic or violent or type or life-threatening events. And it got expanded into this other area. And the way it's defined now is that post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental health problem that's usually developed after experiencing or witnessing a life-threatening event like combat or natural disaster, a car accident, sexual assault, physical assault, things like that. But it's also about you can either be a victim or you could just be simply witnessing something that has been traumatic, and those things can vary, like from, I was talking to Pastor Stewart today. He's down in Knoxville, and they just had they had a mass shooting in Knoxville just today, just hours ago. And, and how, and the pastors are getting called in. So you're talking about terrorism. You're talking about racism, you're talking about murder, suicide, death in general. Is seen as a post-traumatic, something that causes post-traumatic stress disorder. Hearing the stories of people that we talk to every day, how that's traumatic within itself. And a lot of people, like I said earlier, don't either they have a small group of people that they may talk to, or they don't have anybody they talk to, and they go through this by themselves. And so tonight, and what really partially spurred this conversation on was because of some of the things that I've experienced as a pastor, being a pastor now for 14 years, but also something that Stuart Peoples posted on his page about post-traumatic stress disorder. And I guess I want to start this conversation out with Pastor Peoples. Stuart, what brought that on?
Well, thanks for having me, and I appreciate you having this for everyone to see and to hear, and for us to help each other. And good evening, brothers. Appreciate your presence and your ministries. What brought this on? Well, more and more pastors coming forward. The pandemic caused some of it to come out. Many pastors feel overwhelmed. And I will just put it this way: you'd be surprised at how many pastors are now atheists. In the pulpit, if not anti-theist. They have seen enough to whereas they need now question themselves and question God. And so they're wrestling with that. They're wrestling with the trauma of what they have seen in ERs with this pandemic. And even before that, there's a lot of things that we have not healed from, but we're so mechanical in ministry. We have been trained to make it look like it doesn't hurt, when it really does. And all we're really doing is hurting ourselves by keeping it to ourselves.
Wow, you just said a ton right through there. And because as I remember coming on as a young preacher, I heard pastors say, if you have a member die that you're close to, don't you dare let them see you cry. Don't you let, but understand, when you have relationships with people, and someone close, someone that passes, you've built this relationship over time. And I just had a member I passed away from COVID about 2 weeks ago, and I was very close to him. He encouraged me. When I was like giving up, he would talk to me, encourage me along. And so I had developed a relationship with him. And so when he passed, I had to catch myself because I went into automatic pilot. I mean, do you guys find yourself when going into automatic pilot where it's just you should shut down emotionally and you just become super pastor? Do you find yourself, Pastor Charles?
Yes. Oh, that's not a good question for me.
Go ahead.
That's not a good question for me.
Okay, well, let me put it over to Pastor Stewart then. Pastor Stewart, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, I don't think it's a good question for me either, because I have no problem admitting I'm a punk. I will cry flat out in front of my church members and just let them know, look, this is not okay. But the part that does make you numb is how many times can you acknowledge this is not okay and nothing in your church change, or this is not okay and nothing in your political community changes, and that we don't reach out. And so eventually you do get to a point to where great loss is literally just a great loss. And I know that sounds awful, but there comes a time, man, where you don't even feel it. You don't. It's not even super pastor. It's what we're supposed to do. I've hugged people several times because it was the right thing, not because I emotionally felt attached to them. And I think so many of us have gotten to this place to where we almost turn ourselves off because we can't feel everything that happens. It doesn't mean everything that has happened we don't feel. But we do not allow for ourselves to be wrapped up in the moment, to get that loss out of our souls, to where we're looking at a church or we're preaching in a traditional sense, that we look to that spot in the, in the sanctuary to where that individual sits and they're no longer there. Or just the mere fact that there are certain members, and it seems like it always the good members God takes, so the devil sneaks up out of here. I mean, it ain't never the hellion that I can't get rid of. It's the one. It seemed to be the one that ain't never brought me no drama, ain't never brought me no issue. Right. I mean, just the one. He was on the oxygen tank. Yeah, the Joker smoked like a chimney. But you know what? That's my dude. And somehow or another, God let that one go. But the one that the one that make the same prayer, but then be the same one that cuts you out when you work on helping them solve that community issue. Man, I ain't saying I want God to take them, but if he take them.
Well,
go ahead, Charles. I know you waiting to jump in.
It's interesting that we talk about this trauma, and because this is something that we are born with trauma. And just over the last, let's just be real honest, over the last 36 months is when we really discovered the definition for the hell we've grown through. What we were born into. In my other field of business, we talk about trauma-informed care. And I'm like, is that the name of this? Because we've been doing this all our life. And where we are, and right now, and it's sort of coming together, I feel the church been traumatized over the last 5 years anyway. And now with COVID, it just really brings it forward of just how traumatized the church is. And that, how do you deal with the raw emotions of multiple deaths that you can't explain? And I felt there was a trauma also because the church is not prepared to handle the trauma.
Right.
We've talked about this. There's been where's the power of the church? There used to be a time when a disease, a pandemic, or something of this magnitude would happen. You would hear about prayers all over the country. You would hear about revival breaking out. You would hear about people being healed. And so, but the church is so traumatized, we haven't seen any of that.
Well, but Charles, I guess one of the things is that if you look at it from the pastor is traumatized. And if you have a traumatized pastor who's never been trained or who's never been healed, who's never none of us have never pastored during a pandemic.
Right.
We don't know what to do, how to do it. All this, we learning this thing as we go. And so when you have members that pass away, like Stuart was talking about a disease, from a disease that we really don't know much about. It's and when you lose that one person, like Bryant was talking about, that you're close to, and it's really hard to even explain. As a void that we feel. Rather than deal with the feelings and emotions that surround that, we have a tendency to shut it down because we have an image that we've got to portray to the congregation.
And that's
not being fair to us.
Right. But that's the next part of my statement. So in addition, the church will always go the way the pastor goes. If I want to see how a church really functions, I look and see, do they literally have the scent of that pastor? And you could, people can dispute this all day long, but your parishioners act just like you do. And if you are not vulnerable,
all right,
and if you have not created a culture of vulnerability, that's a new buzzword now, then your congregations aren't going to be vulnerable. Just like I can show you churches where the pastor is not relational, the people aren't relational. And so now here we are as pastors coming into pulpit ministry, traumatized all of our life. Many people are coming out of church situations where they were hurt and traumatized and lied to and abused, and now they leading flocks. Move the pandemic out of the way. You just messed up anyway. And so now we sit in the pulpit with these facades and these images that I'm the tough guy. And you're right, folks say pastors shouldn't cry. The devil is a lie.
That's right.
Jesus wept.
Okay.
We should be weeping too. And what your people see is what they will emulate. And that is empathy, that is compassion, that is passion, and all of that all routes to the heart of God. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what happened, God still loves us.
And but that's where also, my friend, that's where also comes the pressure. Right. Because of what you're saying, because they're looking at us. That is the added pressure to the trauma that we've experienced. And now let's bring the pandemic back in. Now we're not dealing with who's wearing what on what day and what committee and so on. It's been crisis after crisis now.
Yes.
So now we're dealing with job losses. We're dealing with diseases. We're dealing with abuse that is up. We're dealing with parents that are burned out. We're dealing with kids and depression. So now we're not talking about loyalty month days for the unloyal. Now we're literally dealing with crisis every day, and we're not getting a break. And we'll discuss about we talk about God, and yes, because
go ahead.
We're gonna have to go there too, because when it comes to these things that have traumatized us, in the back of my mind at least, I cannot escape the awareness of God's attributes. When I'm thinking about someone who has just been raped, and then I have to deal with the reality that God is omnipresent, which means that when her clothes came off, God was in the room. When someone was being molested, God was in the room. And I'm turning to this same God to help me from something that he didn't prevent. And so this even more so complicates things for a pastor, because we're trying to recommend people to someone that we're struggling with sometimes ourselves. And this complicates things.
Come on
when
in
it
the
comes
house.
to trauma, because God is supposed to be a very present help in a time of trouble. And I know some lonely preachers, and loneliness is a deadly thing. You'll talk to the devil for a few minutes just for the sake of conversation, if you get too lonely. And so therefore, this is something we got to deal with. It ain't just what the parishioners are going through, but what we're going through theologically.
Come on.
And how do we get, and other people, they see servants in the pews. We see services. We see people who eventually or immediately die. And we can't even start the grieving process because we're looking at who else is on the sick and shut-in list.
That's right.
And so therefore, we know God is love, but some of this is some tough love.
It is.
And we got to deal with it because sometimes we feel unloved ourselves.
Yeah.
Come on.
That's right.
Good word.
That's right. Hey, Brian, what you got?
Oh man, nah, I'm resonating with all of it. And that's just that side of it. We're not even discussing the fact that the very person that I was talking about, the Lord chose to spare and let them live. Now, that same individual that has constantly abused you and confronted you and all that other stuff, now all of a sudden, they come down with a sickness. Now, all of a sudden, they come down with an illness. And now you got to be put in I'm just going to be honest, in the most uncomfortable position to where you got to minister to somebody that, to be honest, you don't want to minister to. You ain't got much for them. I mean, whether it be I'm petty, whether it be that I'm tired, whether it be that I'm abused, but every now and then I'd be like, now have you learned your lesson about not touching God's anointed? I'm just gonna be honest, because it'll come so quick that it feels like that thing sits on you, and then you still got to do the right thing, whatever that is.
And then sometimes you have to do the right thing in the same place. The trauma is also complex because we constantly have to go to the same hospitals that we just saw death with. We have to go to the same ERs.
Yes.
And so we relive that. We haven't started the grieving process yet, and we got to go right back sometimes that week to the same site of the death.
The same place.
That's right.
Yes. And then on top of that, Pastor Peoples, we run back into the idea, praying the same prayer, hoping that it works.
Don't get me started.
You feel like it failed.
Don't get me started.
No. Go ahead, Stuart. Go ahead.
No, I mean, man, I mean,
we're chopping it up. Go ahead.
like y'all, you got to go back into that mug and pray with the same fervor, with the same effectual fervent prayer of the righteous. And ain't sure if you're going to avail this time like you feel like you failed the last time. And everybody wants to talk about it's unhealthy for the pastor to feel that it is our responsibility to put that level of prayer and sincerity and weight on our shoulders that a person lives or dies. But when you see a couple of instances like Pastor Wallace said, where you done seen somebody pray a incredible prayer, and then somebody who was bound towards death resurrects, or somebody who had no heartbeat comes back, you start to question and have a traumatic experience about the level of investment, and you always are pouring out with hardly nobody pouring in, but
you.
everybody with their hand out waiting for you to pour one more in. And that thing just becomes continuously exhausting.
Hey, we have a question. We have a question from Akron, Ohio. And basically it says this: understand confidentiality. How do you react when you see things people have shared happen again that is harmful to someone else you know?
Could you reword the question?
Okay, basically knowing that, okay, people come to you. They speak, they talk to you in confidence, they share their stuff with you. But then you see these exact same people who shared this stuff with you go out and harm other people. They done traumatized you, brought it to you, and no, you can't say nothing because of confidentiality. Or else, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's time to meet me in my office at 2:00, and we're gonna go over this. We're gonna have to settle it. We're gonna have to talk. We have to address it in some way.
Right. And I think one of the things, and Pastor Stewart hit on it, was having the boldness and the wherewithal to say, you need to come on in the office.
Yep.
A lot of pastors will internalize all of these isms and schism and not go out and address it. I've seen them where they say, well, I'm going to leave that for deacon so-and-so to handle, or minister so-and-so to handle. No, he gave it to you to handle.
Right.
But so you need to address it now. Because if you don't address it, what it does, you start internalizing, and that creates a stress and really an internal trauma that you caused on yourself.
Yeah, but now this is also the importance when you see that you've got to cross these big issues, these big seas. This is the biggest, the most important thing in Moses' hand was his staff, and that's how it crossed. The most important thing in our availability is our staff, and when we cannot, because we have been traumatized, we can only take so much. I hope not all churches have trained staff.
Right.
They just have volunteer. They never been to school for any of this.
Right.
Come on.
And that's what's so troubling is that the church I serve, they do their very best. But you work with who you come into. The president comes to the White House with his own cabinet.
Right.
We come in and have to work with the previous administration that may or may not be prepared for what you have to go through. And so I admit, like you're saying, brother, we need to address these things. We need to call them in. But what do we do when we're dealing with post-traumatic, with all these traumas to the point that we can't take another one-on-one?
Right. But because check this out. Because what you're saying is so true. And it's not so much you got to deal with your previous administration, but a lot of us went to school and were never even trained even to how to deal with this stuff our own selves.
Right.
How to deal with trauma, how do we one, protect ourselves, how do we heal, how do we, when we're approached with these traumatic events, what do we need to do to remain in touch with reality? Because what I see happening is this. I see this happening. I see a lot of self-destructive behavior out of my fellow pastors. I see a lot of always being on guard, because they have trust issues, because I don't feel like I can trust anybody. They being easily startled, their anxiety, they have depression, their irritability. They're not the most, they're the meanest people, as mean as a snake, all these other different things that we deal with now because we've been traumatized, and people don't understand that this is when you see pastors starting to do these things. Well, I don't feel like I can get close to my pastor. Well, your pastor probably been through some stuff to where he's now got to the point to where he don't trust nobody.
But that's why pastors need pastors.
Right.
The problem is but one of the traumatizing things in me is this. My father left in 2019. He was also my father in ministry.
Yeah.
So I needed to go to my pastor about my father, and my pastor was gone too. So then you have to get through that trauma. And then we have to learn how to preach the funerals of those who are close to us, our parents and all that. And that stays with us. And I guess what we're saying is that transparently speaking, we go through more than people think. We make it look easy.
Yes, we do.
But that's because we're professionals at what we do.
Come on.
Say that.
But we're not as tough as you think. And it will show up in one way or another. We make it look easy.
Right.
And that's the reason why I don't like, saying you couldn't pay us enough for what we go through.
Right.
True.
Correct.
That's very true.
That's if we get paid.
Right.
Yeah. But you can try.
A whole nother, right.
That's a whole nother show.
That's a whole nother show, right. But I also want to expound on the fact that, as far as a pastor is really understanding where I am or where we are as an individual. You need to confront that person and realize what your shortcomings are or whatever you have to build on. And this is the one thing, that the thread that stays in place. The message of Jesus Christ never changed, but the method changes constantly. And when I worked in large churches and they had a psychologist on staff, someone who has degrees in psychology and counseling, I look back at our church, i.e. the Black church, and be like, wow, they would never have anybody on staff with this degree. But somebody recognized that there's some things when you finish praying, what you gonna do?
Right.
Because something is clinical help.
Yeah.
Some things is clinical help, and we aren't degreed for clinical help. We can't go write prescriptions to someone to get a medicine that can give them some balance.
Right.
As a pastor, we pray, we assess, God give us an answer. That's all he asked us to do. But sometimes you got to go understand this person needs clinical help, and it's way out of my hand.
But the thing about it is, though, but again, I have to fall back on to the way a lot of ministers were trained or pastors were trained. They come from that where the pastor is everything. Yep. They the chef, they the mental health, they the therapist, they the usher, the deacon, they do it all.
Don't get me started.
And so you're dealing with a lot of people who just don't they're in this role that they fell into, and they, as a result of that, they've been traumatized because of the lack thereof, and so I guess one of the things I've actually seen and actually experienced as a result of post-traumatic, I've seen more divorces happen within the clergy than anything. I've heard what you say. Oh,
I've been there, done that.
Oh, right, and it's a lot of that has to deal with a lot of, again, issues that traumatic issues that we haven't dealt with. And again, I'm not trying to. I don't want this to come off as a crying session for but we want people to become aware. As I think it was Stuart that said earlier, that we do more and we experience more than what you think.
Right.
Just because.
But can I jump on that point just real quick, because I guess my liberation has come.
Yeah.
Because as a pastor, you want to make sure you're taking care of the flock and you're doing all these things.
Right.
And then I heard this subtle little voice say, God said, excuse me, sir, but those are my sheep.
Yeah.
You're responsible for that wife and 3 kids you got. That's your responsibility. And all of this other stuff that people make up to say this is what the pastor should do, and should be there every Sunday and miss their son's football games. No, that's not God. That's ritualistic, religious stuff.
Bullcrap. Let me just put it that way.
Thank you.
Because honestly, I learned that my daughter's freshman year in college. I was traumatizing my family and putting them through a lot of stuff because I had to be there every Sunday. But then it finally got to the point, I said, son, we're going to go to a track meet. Went to a track meet and where she was running, and all these other parents were there. And they were like, oh, yeah, we go to every track meet. We travel in packs. And I said right there, I said, I will never, ever miss another one of her track meets because of somebody else who's Google. When they can leave whenever they want to. They can go on vacation whenever they want to. They can get away. You know what I'm saying? But me, I don't have what our white brothers and sisters have, which is sabbaticals, where you can depart for 2 months with pay.
You should.
You should.
I'm not gonna be messy. I'm speaking the truth. You should.
Yeah.
And if COVID has done nothing else, it should shift the thinking of our churches and our leadership of our churches. Mm-hmm. Hear ye this word. If you don't change, you're gonna be closed. Because there were some churches that could not shift, they could not pivot, they could not do anything electronically. They just still thinking that Miss Eula May is gonna come by and drop her tithes off. Not happening.
And let me drop this out there real quick, because the truth is, when all of the members have been baptized, when all of the people who were whooping your head are still alive, and all the ones you depended on are dead, the only people you got on your team is your family. And it has blown my mind to see how much, not so much they needed me, but I needed them. A chance just to be born again. A chance to cry and not be judged and not seen as faithful. A chance to really have a moment to detox and not feel held accountable for the lack of, for the lack of godliness in my soul, because I needed the detox. And so I really endorse that notion, man. And that's to anybody in any service field. You got to give your family the time, not just because they need you, but you need them. Sometimes it's good not to be pastor. Sometimes it's good not to be a police officer.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just good to be flat out daddy, flat out B, flat out nephew, uncle, whatever it is. Sometimes that is the most rejuvenation your soul needs.
I'm sorry, but again, it's one of those types of things but we've been running on automatic pilot so much as pastors that the trauma that we've experienced, we don't deal with, because again, we're on automatic pilot.
Well, that plane's gonna crash.
The plane will crash.
That plane
will run out of gas.
I think I'll put it like this, and good to see Brother Crutchfield as well. We're talking about the trauma that we have been through, and I'll admit my church family has been very supportive of me when I've, especially Pastor and my father, they were right there. Mm-hmm. But I think you all can relate. I've watched babies come off of the breathing machine.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I've had people to come down. And I started taking me a Valium before this show because I want to calm down. I've watched people come down and ask for prayer. Mm-hmm. One of my closest ministers came down, didn't even know it. This is what shook me up. Mm-hmm. He came down and he said, I didn't even know it. He said, I was diagnosed with stage 4, this, that, and the other. Mm-hmm. And then he looked at me and he said, God's not listening to me, but I know he'll listen to you.
Yeah, that's heavy.
So if you pray for me,
right,
I think I can get through it. Mm-hmm. Now that was heavy. And I told him, really, I'm not, I appreciate that, but I only take you to the chief surgeon. Only he can do it. But I asked the whole church to come down and pray for him.
Yeah.
In 6 days, he was dead. What do you do with that?
Right.
And the trauma that is felt by not only by pastors, but the congregations, because they're asking, wait a minute, we prayed in faith. Mm-hmm. He came in faith. And then you start to think to yourself, if that could happen to him. And most of us are just a few days away from being diagnosed with something.
Yeah.
What's going to happen to us? Our mortality is in our faces.
Yeah.
And now we start to question. We know there's comfort, but we want some more than comfort. We want some miracles and some, and I'm not talking about miracles with side effects. I mean, this is these pandemic, these shots that we're taking, stuff like that. Miracles don't have side effects. We want healings. And all I'm saying is that people expect healings and miracles. And when I came out of a room from people expecting a baby to live and they died, and what scarred me, help me God. Speaking of trauma, the child died, the baby died. And as I went back down the hallway, a girl looked up to me sitting on the floor and said, "You ain't no preacher."
Right.
Because if you was a preacher, they would have lived.
They would have
lived. And we live with that.
Yeah, you gotta live with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's just that. We're not talking about the times where we've gone to people's houses where they've passed away. And we're sitting there and we're supposed to be praying over this person who lost their life.
Yeah.
And in the midst of us picking up this body to pray with the funeral home, a sibling comes in that had a squabble with their father and their other sister. And in the midst of us trying to gather for prayer, they have a fight over a gun. Yeah. Because one sibling's determined that they're ready to blow the other one away. And while they're fighting, the gun points in your direction several times. Nurses are flipping across couches.
Yeah.
Wow.
Funeral home workers are running into kitchens. And then somehow or another, I'm supposed to get up a week from now and pray or preach the Holy Ghost into this room and bring you comfort.
Right.
Knowing that kind of situation just happened to me a week ago, and I ain't got time for therapy. We gotta do a funeral.
Right. Yep. Again, that goes back to that you go on automatic pilot. Because I mean, all of us got a story, where we had, I've had members, they didn't want to be in the room when their relative passed away, and they asked me to be in there, and I'm in there hearing the last breath of your mama or your auntie or your, I've had that, and these are people that I was close to, but like I said, don't have time to
and that's why
breathe.
And that's why I want some of these half-saved Negroes who can't wait to get a church.
Yeah.
Come on in this house.
Come on.
To know what it's really about. It's more than a card and a logo.
That's
we
right.
Make it look slick.
Yeah.
Right.
But we hurting. You better be ready for this.
Yeah.
This is warfare. This is on the battlefield. We ain't playing no games.
Right.
This is not funny.
This ain't fun.
It ain't fun either.
Right.
Right.
No.
It's none of this fun.
Right.
And we are traumatized by these things.
Yes.
And if all these Negroes looking for churches, you better know what you're looking for.
Right.
And that's
most of us didn't even want a pastor. We were drafted into this
thing. Yeah.
Right.
There you go. You said that right back.
Our best sermons come from usually our greatest loss.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So when you see all this shouting and hallelujah and speaking in tongues and running across the floor and baseball sliding through the church, that does not come from a euphoric moment with God. That comes from desperation that if this ain't true, I ain't gonna make it.
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, you're not gonna make it. And what gets me is some of us think, well, we brought the house down and they shouted. They wasn't shouting all because they were rejoicing. They were shouting out of pain.
Pain.
And they've been shouting and they've been praying the same prayer. And we sit up there bragging that they were holding up holy hands. No, they were holding up hands for help.
Help.
Right. 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 And the key is, as a leader and a called person of God, because let's be real honest. Brother Stewart, I love you, brother. Let's be real honest. The calling is traumatizing.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I read the article and it said, it's a pastor that lives in a world of high expectation, high criticism, and low support. And I wrote down HHL. I was like, well, yep, that's hell. Because that's exactly what it is. Yes. High expectation, high criticism, and then no support.
And when are we going to start talking again? Our brother Terry brought it up. We got pastors considering suicide.
Yes.
Yep.
And then on top of that, when people are going through too much hell and consider suicide, then we'll say they're going to hell after the hell they've been through.
Come on, somebody. Come on.
So now they got to have a graveside service when they felt like they were in the grave in the first place.
This is the real conversation right here.
The real conversation.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
If it wasn't for too much, some of us would be hanging from a ceiling.
Right.
For real. That's real.
Laying out on the bathroom floor.
Right.
On the bathroom floor. And what really gets me, don't get me started,
go ahead,
is the theological thing with this as well, because I got to go back to it, because we talk about theodicy and everything else.
Yeah.
If someone wants to commit suicide because they don't think that God cares, and they're successful, was the point proven? Where was the intervention? And this is where my prayers of lament come from. We can only do so much.
That's
we
it.
put on good PR every Sunday, but you're supposed to be a very present help in a time of trouble. And there's a time when we have to keep it 100, even with God, in our frail selves. And you know what? It doesn't mean that we're right, but we're real.
That's right.
That's right.
And we're saying it the way we need to say it. God, where were you? We saw people dying in the back of trucks during this pandemic. You mean to tell me that all those people didn't turn from their wicked ways and seek God's face and all that? You mean, was that what that was about?
Everybody.
And Trump still lives?
Come on.
Wasn't you there too with George Floyd? It wasn't just the people with the cameras. God, you was there too.
Right.
And we got to deal with this too. So while we're dealing with ourselves and dealing with others and death, sometimes we still have to deal with God, and we're hoping. We got scriptures and we know all the things to say, but we still struggle with this thing, man.
That's right.
We got a question. We got a question from Ohio. The question is, you all, how can, and they want to know, how can we help you? What do you need from your membership?
Well, that question is the start of it. Just asking.
Yeah, just
That's
asking.
it.
Are you okay?
Right.
There you go. And
just
I'm
simple.
glad.
Are you okay?
But
we've got to be able to let our guard down and not feel like we've got to, that we're always, that they're asking for alternative reasons.
Well, it depends on who's asking.
That's right. That's true too.
Yeah.
That's true too. But again, it's ask. Just ask. I mean, and that's a simple question, because honestly, you might be the very one that he talks to, your pastor talks to, and you may be able to go to say, you know something, pastor needs to be out of here for a sabbatical, and we need to pay him. You know what I'm saying? To be able to go speak on his behalf, because 9 times out of 10, you got a lot of pastors that won't do that for themselves. Now I can say that for myself. I'll work until I fall down. And that's not good. I'm being honest. That's not healthy. That's not good.
See, I'm on the other side of that, because
you're on the other side.
But I worked with that vigor and until I realized that I almost died and I saw death. And at the end of the day, I was like, Lord, it's just me and you. The members, they say they love you, but they really don't care. The sheep bite and it hurts.
It hurts.
And so when and then people say, well, I wish I had a sabbatical. No, pastor, get a sabbatical. Tell them you're going to take a sabbatical.
Yeah, but brother, but let me tell you something. In especially the quote unquote black church, and mine has been very understanding, but I'm talking about in general.
In general.
You can be sick, but don't be sick too long.
That's
exactly.
Right. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
They'll start a committee before the committee.
Come on in this house.
So it's very important that you have those leaders in that church, in your church, that are going to be able to support you and hold your arms up while you going off. You know what I'm saying? While you're doing what you need to do. And honestly, I appreciate that. Like with our church, sometimes they'll come to me and say, "Look, you need to be out of here for a while."
But to that statement though, my day off Monday.
Today.
First of all, I thought our day off was supposed to be on Sunday. What happened to the Sabbath? Well, we won't get there. That's a whole other. That's a whole other. First of all, when is our Sabbath?
People's, it ain't on the Sabbath, because I'm sitting there preaching. I'm sitting there making hospital visits. I'm sitting, you know what I'm saying?
And we'll get mad at people. Yeah, and we'll get mad at people for working on Sundays. Well, what are we doing?
What are we doing?
And then we're going to go and take somebody out to eat to a restaurant. And what are the waitresses doing?
Working.
What are the waiters doing? They're working too.
Working.
Keep it real.
So brother Cedric, Mr. Cedric, what you got?
Man, I got an earful. I mean, I'm listening. I'm growing up, but I think y'all hit every point so far, and my thought is, just sometimes, I guess I got a question for everybody. So when you have, and we talked about, you talked about church leadership. So when we have that church leadership that's out there that wants to give a helping hand, how do we help the ones who we can't help? Like I say, if I come to a pastor and I say, "Hey, I'm here. What you need me to do?" How do the people help?
Go ahead.
I mean, like the article said, first ask, and
Yeah.
secondly, I mean, the second point was provide your pastor with professional counselor, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And a lot of, and I know we keep differentiating the church, but, sometimes with the benefit package, if the pastors work with church, they have, employee assistant programs where you can call and get that. If they don't, though, at the end of the day, guys, we are responsible for ourselves. Never leave it up to no church board or its members to take care of you and your family. I cannot say that enough.
And I
Because
cannot.
just as fast as they putting that committee together to replace you, if you sick and gone, they're gonna cry, have your service, but guess what? That church gonna be open the next week.
And that's why I said in the last show, we not only need to know how to spell installation, but resignation. We got to know when it's our time, when that's enough. There are other forms of ministry. There are other things to be done. But pastoring, you have to know when you have served your time, when you have done, you pray about it, take them as far as you can. And ain't nothing wrong with this thing about retiring. And I've heard people say, we talked about this last time. I'm just gonna give up. I'm not gonna give up till I go up and all that. I'm gonna die in the pulpit. But when the family hears that, what kind of trauma is that putting on them?
That's right.
Come on.
Yeah.
That's right.
And for the ministers, for those of us who are ministers and associate ministers, et cetera, really invest in yourself for ministry. I know that sounds so crazy, but in the mere fact that you can read the 5 disciplines of leadership, you can read different mental health, self-help groups, the book on death and dying. There's so many different things that you can do to elevate yourself that when your pastor actually goes through and gets in a situation, that you can then start to know where he's going in his transitions to help him through different segues with loss of members, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then even check with him. Pastor, would you like for the? I was reading a book and it said this. Would you prefer that I do this? But there's so many different ways for those who are ministers like Elder Crutchfield that are phenomenal to actually put yourself in a position that as we go through different things, just ask them. So, Pastor, how did they deal with that? And I'm not saying that from to debunk Elder Wallace or Archbishop Peoples, but I really want to just discuss the fact that we really want to lean on the idea that if you're an associate, if you're a minister, don't work on your preaching. That will come, and don't get me wrong. I think we put too much emphasis on it, but there's several other stages to ministry that are administrative and counseling based that we really got to dive into. If our majority of us say people need counseling, but the truth is our membership ain't got insurance or they ain't got the money to get a counselor, and so the reality of it is you the only one they got, and there's stages where we can build ourselves or build a team around you to help with that.
And our dilemma,
not that you have to be a doctorate, but just some process.
Yes, and our dilemma as well, going back to some mentions, our dilemma as well is we're coming off. Well, we're still in the pandemic. Another phase is coming. Let's not be fooled. But
that's a variant.
There's another variant there. Okay, and so my thing is this: the frontliners are already burned out.
Dead.
So when it comes to us seeking professional help, we're going to professionals who are already burnt out. And how do we deal with that? Most of us will look at secular psychologists and psychiatrists. We won't go to the Christian ones. Not really, because we're afraid they're going to chirp.
You mean the secular bottle or the secular smoke?
Yeah, all that. No, I'm talking about, yeah. You put that in there too.
I'm just keeping it real.
Yeah, well, I'll put it this way. There are ways that people have coped, but they're trying to get through this post-traumatic stress. We still dealing with grief. We still with people that died during the pandemic. They just got a graveside service. They were only limited to 10, 15 folk and so on. We still don't know what we deal with. The fellowship is not back where it is. You can forget about choir members and all that. All people down to right now is screen teams, not praise teams, screen teams. Everybody got a microphone and all that kind of stuff. And so everything has changed. And now we're trying to change while we need healing at the same time. Being cyber pastors. This is a phenomenal thing to get through. And that's why I appreciate this kind of transparency, because at least we know we're not alone.
Right. No. Because check this out. Not only with the passing of members, but when you have members, when you have people that were part of your congregation that leave, that's traumatic. And they leave with no explanation, no reasoning, no nothing. It's all, and you're sitting there and and it just plays with your head. Let's just be real. Did I say something that made them leave? Did I do something what? I mean, honestly, that plays in.
And on the other side, where you went to the numb side, where it's like, I've got to fill this spot that doesn't exist, and now you work it out of your wheelhouse.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Stuart.
And now it's come down to when you talk about cyber pastors, spoken leaders.
Your volume.
Can you turn yourself up, Stuart?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Say it again.
I said now people are leaving, and because everybody's a cyber pastor, it depends on who's got the best presentation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
We can copy the best person worship off of YouTube.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And now, so we got to get together to have. So now we're competing with
Uh-huh.
Christian consumerism. Seeing which other members we can get and keep. And my point of view is this: you're talking about members leave. If somebody, I'm like this: if you can't get help here, please get help somewhere. But do it for the right reasons.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But churches are closing.
Yep.
And how do we deal with that trauma?
Well, but it goes back to number one, trusting that God is in control of it all. If the person leaves, God, you control that. Because you will beat yourself up. You will literally traumatize. You will internalize and stress yourself out, wondering why they left and what happened. But we're talking about churches closing, and it all goes back to the church needing to be ready instead of trying to get ready.
Get ready. Yes, sir.
And so I honestly believe with every fiber in my body, when this is over, we will truly see a true remnant of the church.
But let me say this, brother, let me ask you this. You said be ready and get ready, but the church was not ready. The country wasn't ready for this.
That's true.
And so there was no prep. All of a sudden we were in church one Sunday, and the next Sunday we were gone for a whole year.
Yep.
There's no prep for this. And you talking about older ministers now, they got to learn how to work iPhones and look into screens and all that kind. They ain't never worked with that.
Right.
But why? Come on, let's be transparent. Why is it that they never worked with it? Because they just our church will never do that. Our church didn't need that.
Some of them are like that. You're exactly right. Some of them don't have the resources, and that's showing up too.
Exactly.
But you know what? At the same time, I'm praying for the brothers of these mega churches because they got mega issues. They're doing whatever they can now to make sure that they keep it coming because folks are straying during this pandemic.
Oh yeah.
Because what's happening is, again, I don't have to go to a building. I can go right here.
That's right.
I've been doing it for a year.
That's true.
I can pay my tithes to whoever I want to.
Yeah.
And I can give an offering where I want to. I can see whoever's hot right now. I can do that. Whoever's got the best production, I can go there. But we have a question. Well, go ahead, Brian. We have a question.
And can we talk about the difficulty of the guy that you sowing a seed into is not the one that's going to show up for your funeral or at your hospital bed, and the difficulty of you asking to draw from a well that you ain't depositing into, because that aspect. And then that determining the level of success, and when you're in an institution like I am, that can ship your butt to Mississippi. That can ship your butt to somewhere undesirable in Tennessee or undesirable in Alabama, where it's a gentleman's club to even go get a cup of coffee. And how that threat hiking up on the edge of your shoulders constantly keeps you in this traumatic rat race that nothing's a marathon, everything's a sprint, because I've got to make sure that after this next executive committee meeting this month, that my behind is still here because brother so and so had to screw somebody, other brother so and so was laid to rest, and the other brother so and so his ministry took off in wherever it is, and that they want to reward him. And while I'm out here doing what's therapeutically and best for the church to get them out of this looking forlorn and this season of melancholy to do nothing, it's gonna ship my tail somewhere else. Man, this stuff is rough. Some days I wish I was Baptist. That holding somebody that's trash versus Adventist enough move your behind around.
He said he wished he was Baptist. We do have a question.
Here come the new vine, bro.
From Cleveland, Ohio. We have one. It says, how many pastors are actually planning for their retirement or succession plan that would allow them to step back from some of the demands of ministry while supporting who's next?
We got pastors who are planning to be bivocational. That's what they planning for. Retirement. Lord have mercy. Some of the youth have strayed. The elderly are going to be with the Lord, and talking about retirement, they may not have enough people there and resources to support any kind of retirement.
No.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to plan, but the truth is, part of our trauma is that we don't have security like that.
We don't.
And by the way, don't think every pastor is just out here stroking his ego because he's creating a book. That book is his retirement plan.
Well, but think about it.
You said, plan.
But Stuart, you said something though. You said, say that one more again.
Who, me?
Listen,
Stuart.
Me?
People.
Yeah, Stuart.
Peoples.
We're talking about planning.
Yeah, answering as you answered that question. You said something that really sparked something within me.
I was talking about job security. You talking about brother, and all their lives. Okay. All they've done all their life is ministry, and they may now have to look at something else.
Well, I mean, honestly, and COVID has made that very real. And again, that's that whole traumatic piece. We're experiencing something that we've never experienced before, and it's affecting us in so many ways as pastors, as ministers, that because we've never been here before, we have no point of reference. And so what's happening now is, again, it's trial and error. Okay, let me try. Okay, I may wind up having to cut my salary. I have to cut the musician, and I know that's their livelihood. I got to cut my pay, just so that the church can keep the lights on. And what that does to us as individuals, because one of the things that I'm gonna say this, and then we're gonna start wrapping up, is one of the things as being traumatized, and I really always hated to ever even admit, was that feeling of emotional numbness.
Mm. But it's sometimes necessary. And at the same time, it's sometimes necessary because we've become to the point now, whereas we're trying not to get too close to people, because every time a parishioner dies, part of us dies. There's only so much of us left.
That's right.
So we become mechanical, as I mentioned, or become numb. Sometimes it's not on purpose. It's just a guard. We're protecting ourselves, but we've got to be careful, like what you're talking about, that we don't get that way and become unsympathetic and empathetic towards people. And when you can no longer feel, you're a dangerous pastor.
You're dangerous.
Yep. You're a dangerous
dude. And that's exactly where I was headed, Pete Stewart, is that right there. It's because we'll become detached from family and friends. We find ourselves losing interest. One of the things that I found myself was dealing with was difficulty expressing positive emotions, and difficult maintaining close relationships with people. Because again, a fear of people leaving or dying or whatever it got me to this point to where I was like, let me just back up and just stay to myself, because if I'm with myself, I can't leave myself.
And you slide into this madhouse because to really, it's difficult to share it with a brother that you ain't afraid, or a fellow pastor that you ain't afraid is gonna try to stuff you out of your church. No more than do you feel like you feel safe enough they got the time to deal with it, but they don't have enough capacity to bear your load and theirs.
And that's the reason why people ought to appreciate this broadcast, because we're taking a risk at being this transparent. There are people who may look at us in the future and say, well, if you're dealing with this, we don't know if we're going to look your way. We're taking a risk, but it's a good one, because there's some pastors and ministers, some preachers that need to hear that they're not the only one going through this. And that's why, soldiers got to be there for soldiers.
That's right.
That's right.
That's true.
I
want to leave you all with this. One of the people that are really listening to us tonight, she said, this is a great, from Cleveland, Ohio. She said, this is a great discussion. Thank you all for your transparency. I want to say that to you all personally. Thank you all for your transparency. This show is going to be divided up over 3 segments. And I really appreciate, I love it when we all get together, because the conversation is real and transparent. I would just love to be in the same room, have a discussion where we're all in the same room.
Yes. And anybody could pastor for 2 weeks, but try pastoring for years and you still being traumatized. Now do that. Try pastoring while you traumatized. Now do that.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm going to say this because this happened to me once. A person lost her job. She blamed me for losing her job. She blamed me for losing her apartment. She blamed me for losing her car. Literally, and cussed me out in the process. And we're supposed to be doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And how that was really traumatic. Brian was around with that, and so was Cedric. They were both around with that, and that really that threw me. And people don't understand, like you were talking about Stuart earlier. If you had just prayed, he wouldn't have died. He wouldn't have died or whatever about that situation.
That still sticks with me.
That's a heavy weight to be throwing on somebody. That you're the reason why I lost my job. You're the reason why I lost no. But that's a lot to try to put on somebody.
That's right.
Right.
And if you're a young pastor and don't know how to deal with that right there will again have you stressing, have anxiety attacks. I mean, I'm speaking from a place of knowledge. Okay, I'm not talking from what somebody done told you. I'm talking about anxiety, not being able to sleep, and then you're dealing with your own stuff.
And let's talk about the fact that you don't want to be a one-trick pony. Let's say you pray and then they put the reverse charm on your tail. Where, pastor, it was only because of you that we got this place. And now you sitting here with the weight of God's anointing on your shoulder. Yeah, glory on your shoulder. And you're sitting here like, Lord, I prayed that this wasn't a fluke. I prayed that it can put you in a very psychotic down spiral and isolation to where you're afraid to just be human.
Hey, brother, what do you do when on one side of the congregation somebody gives a praise report and then somebody else on the other side stands up and says, we need your prayers because they've done all they could do?
Yeah.
And you got to celebrate and comfort in the same service.
Same breath.
Yeah.
Same breath.
It'll change you.
It will change. It will change you.
I'll take you out if you ain't careful.
But gentlemen, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
I feel like we are just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
With this. Definitely. And I really said, you got something you want to say?
No, I was just sitting there thinking that, as with this conversation, it reminds me of different congregations. I haven't said a whole bunch. I've been taken in, but I haven't been given out. But I do want to say this, and something that I'm learning to do, and I thought I had this down, but I didn't. But in order to really truly serve our senior pastors, as support staff, which is what I am. I'm support staff. You can call me a whatever fancy name you want, but what we have to do is we have to learn to be more flexible with our pastors, right? We've got to learn to pray. We've got to learn to be patient. We've got to learn to assist even when we're not asked to, even when we don't have the inside track. You understand what I'm saying? And I think that we as ministers, as elders, as the support staff, I feel like we don't display the type of loyalty to pastors that we need, because this is what I want people to understand is look, you're not worshiping the man, right? Right? You're holding him up. You want to be there. When you read into the Bible, everybody needed help. I like to use Moses. Moses could not have done it by himself. Even when Joshua was physically fighting the battles, Moses still had to be up on the hillside. Y'all know he still had to have help to hold his hands up, right? He wasn't weak. He wasn't any of the. There was nothing bad about that. What he needed was help, and he accepted the help. But we, as the congregation, we have to learn to help.
Well, I'll tell you this much: if there's anything that came out of this pandemic, it showed pastors who's with him and who's not.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's also you pastors who really got our back and go, who there for the glory and the praise and the shout, and who ain't. Because I can tell you right now, never mind. I'm about to give a personal testimony.
Right, but but yet also show again, and this is one of the other sides I believe of my calling. It also shows the business administration side of a church, and that the pastor's well-being should be part of his contract per se, or even the bylaws of the church. What happens when? And so if nothing else, this is something that make the church say, you know what, we need to be prepared moving forward.
That's right.
And like you said, some folks will fall by the wayside. Some folks will. I know churches that raised more money last year than they ever have in their existence. So it's not all bad, but they were able to pivot, and they were able to bring a message of comfort and empathy. And they weren't in a bit, well, we about to die. We don't know what we gonna do. It was a real interesting space, but this is also opportunity for churches to really get serious about and here I go, the business of being a church.
Right.
This is what we're talking about: sabbatical, pastor well-being. All of this is all part of the structure and business of running a healthy organization.
And because of the weight of the office, so many churches need to swallow the fact that we need more than one pastor on staff. That there needs to be one pastor that legitimately is the spiritual pastor, another pastor that is administrative, and both of them have the ability to be versatile. Because the reality of it is that this pandemic alone just showed us, what if everybody's life goes to hell? That the one man ain't enough. Because even the support workers need to be compensated in some way to make a difference, because there's no way without my retired and without some of the people just put their hands.
Lost you, Brian.
My back.
So we gotta go, guys. Thank you all so much for your time, your input. I have a feeling we're going to have to revisit this again.
Yeah, it's layers.
Yeah. Stuart Peoples, aren't you doing something? Are you trying to do a discussion?
Yeah, I'll be doing a discussion as well on this on Facebook, and I'll let y'all know when it occurs. And look forward to your wisdom and input on it, because I know we've articulated the problems, but I look forward to how we even more so articulate the solutions. We have begun to do it, but how does that happen systematically? How do we figure out? And we're going to have to really reach out to some pastors and take some surveys. Who's hurting out there? Who needs to be? What are you going through? Yeah. Come to us and we'll help you out. And we're not going to spread your business.
No, that's right. Nope. But again, Stuart, if we can come on your show, or we can come back here and revisit it here, and we can continue this discussion. And make it a part. Well, it's going to be part D, just because it's going to be broken up in 3 different sections. So we can come back here, and we can talk solutions. Is that okay?
Good. That's good.
Okay. Look, y'all free next week?
We'll make it happen.
Make it happen.
I'll be free.
All right, we'll be free next week. See you all then. Thank you all for joining So You Think with Pastor Terry. Amen. See you all next week.
All right, peace.
Everybody.